This is the multiple award-winning GardenDC podcast, the podcast about everything gardening in the Washington, D.C. and Mid-Atlantic region. I'm your host, Kathy Gents. I'm the editor of Washington Gardener magazine. Our content is aimed at gardening enthusiasts, people who grow everything, from edibles to ornamentals, natives to exotics. If it grows in our area, that's what we talk about. Welcome to episode 222 of the GardenDC podcast. In this episode, we talk with Katie Dubow of the Garden Media Group all about 2025's gardening trends. The plant profile is on silver and gold chrysanthemum, and we share what's going on in the garden, as well as some upcoming local gardening events in the What's New segment. We close out with the last word on soil solarization from Christy Page of Green Prints. This episode, we're joined by returning guest Katie Dubow, president of the Garden Media Group, and we have had her on in the past talking about their famous Garden Trends report. And so this year, we're going to be talking about 2025 and all the good stuff coming in our gardening world. But before we dive into that, Katie, how has your last year been personally and professionally?
My goodness, it has flown by, hasn't it? It has been wonderful. It's been a good year. I've done a lot more traveling this year, Kathy. I don't know how you feel, but post-pandemic, I feel like the travel is double that I did in 2019, in 2024. So I have gone to a bunch of great garden events this year, including a speaking event in Spain. So that was one of my goals, was to get back to Europe. I did go pre-pandemic, and it was one of my goals to bring the trends back to Europe. So I was so excited to visit a trade show called Flora, and it was in Valencia. So that was really fun and something that I look to do, because not only for me professionally is it great to be able to bring our trends to Europe, but actually I think I learned more from them probably than they did from me, because just being at a trade show like that, seeing how trade shows are in Europe, or, just anywhere that's not the United States, is just really fascinating. And I learned so much, and even got some trends for 2026, which I know I can't believe I'm already talking about 26, but that's where my head is.
Okay, so I'm going to have to remember to ask you about a little glimpse of 2026 once we get through these 2025 ones. But first I have to ask about that talk in Spain. Did you do it in Spanish?
So no, I had I don't know about you, I took Spanish in high school, which was just a couple years ago. And so I had these big, I think, aspirations about how I was going to speak Spanish, because I've traveled to other countries like Greece. I have no idea. Obviously, it's all Greek to me. So I knew when I would be in other countries that I would not be able to speak their language, read their signs. I thought in Spain I would do better. They speak so fast. My Spanish teacher was Mexican, so he did not have the, when you pronounce things. So I had no idea what they were saying. I attempted to speak Spanish, but I had a translator, which was wonderful. A woman from the Orlandelli group. Orlandelli sells racks to garden centers. So you walk in Homestead Gardens, for example, beautiful houseplant racks. Orlandelli makes those. So she was my translator for the conference. Most people there speak English, so they were able to follow along, but it was really nice to have a translator.
Excellent. Yeah, that would be very trepidatious. Even if you were, really fluent in a second language, it's almost a whole different vocabulary to talk about plants and gardening.
Absolutely.
In another language, unless you can rely on that Latin.
Right.
All right, so travel sounds wonderful. And
have you been to Spain?
I have not.
Oh, you have to add it to your bucket list.
Yeah, definitely Barcelona.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to seeing the gardens, and I think I will definitely do Portugal too, because I have so many gardening friends who are retiring to Portugal, and I'm like, what is there? There's something there that's drawing all these people, so it must be a wonderful gardening scene.
That, and maybe inexpensive.
That too. All right, so let's talk about our 2025 Garden Trends Report. And
Let's see. The theme this year, Nature's Renaissance.
Yes. So if you remember, and if your listeners remember, that every year we have an overarching theme, it ties our trends together. But in itself, it is a trend. But we are also sharing, you should mention, this is on video on YouTube. So you have some slides. Maybe I'll refer to some of the slides. If you're just listening, we'll try to cover everything that is on those slides. But just launch into what Nature's Renaissance is. It's this collective, I think, what we are seeing or starting to see is this yearning to blend the wild with this cultivated. And so when we are looking at this renaissance, it's this shift of urban spaces, and it's starting in incorporating more natural elements, because there are two alarming statistics, Kathy, that when we started researching this, my jaw hit the floor. Number one, 84% of newly built single family homes in 2022 were part of an HOA. So this is what our customers, our gardeners, maybe your listeners are dealing with, is that they have these restrictions on not just what they can plant in their front yard, but what color they can paint their fences, what maybe color they can have their front door, how many containers they can have outside. So there's often these really strict standards on what that yard, front and back, sometimes side, can look like. In addition to that, we have over a quarter of most of our cities, many even more than that, are covered in pavement. So we've got these like in a box. This is how you can do horticulture. And then, if you can even do it at all, because we've paved paradise and put up a parking lot. And so when we started to dive into those statistics, what we realized was that this is not sustainable. And not only is it just not sustainable, but it's not practical for the future of horticulture. If we, as people who love plants, want our hobbies or our industry to thrive into the future, we need to shift how we think about that. And so the first way we think we're seeing that shift is by city gardening. Now, there's already so many great, I know where you live in DC, where I live in Philadelphia, there's a program called Land Care from Pennsylvania Horticultural Society. Are you aware of like a city garden in DC program?
City gardening program from the city itself?
Yeah, where they rejuvenate vacant lots.
No, because DC, knock on wood, doesn't really have a vacant lot issue.
Wow.
So land is, at a super premium.
Yes.
But they are trying to squeeze in as many community gardens and school gardens on DC Parks and Rec property. And of course, wherever there's a rec center or a school, trying to put a garden in on those properties. But yeah, Baltimore for sure. Baltimore, Philly, those type of cities with industrial zones that might have open and vacant lots as well, still definitely growing into that area.
Chicago, Detroit, there are a lot of these initiatives. In fact, I spoke to a number of people, including Anna Maria Leon, who is really at the forefront of this in Chicago, turning these vacant lots into not just green spaces, which I think is great. PHS in Philly has this land care program where they have done 15,000 lots in Philadelphia so far, but they estimate they have thousands more to go. And it's kind of basic. They do grass, a fence, maybe a tree. In Chicago, they're just even more forward. They're trying gravel gardens, permaculture. And then at the flower show this year, you and I both remember Kelly Norris's exhibit and Apiary Studios exhibits, which took a shift on what it would look like if nature reclaimed urban spaces. And so you're piling all these things over. And at the Chelsea Garden Show, which I was not lucky enough to attend, there was even a sidewalk crack garden. So here is what would happen if we just let nature reclaim out of the sidewalk. I mean, it's just really neat things that people are thinking. But the idea is that this renaissance is not just about aesthetics. It's not just about beauty. It's about the recognition of green spaces in our lives. And we think cities are adapting these green spaces. They're adapting these strategies more and more as we realize we've got this climate crisis and an emotional crisis. Not only do we need these green spaces for fresh air, but there's studies show all of the benefits. They reduce violence, they raise property values, and it's really a shift that we're seeing in integrating horticulture more holistically into our lives.
Katie, you are singing my tune.
Yes.
Because you know that Terry Spate and I wrote The Urban Garden,
Yes.
101 Ways to Grow Food and Beauty in the City, and the emphasis and beauty, because so much urban gardening and city gardening that you hear about is all about food production, which is super important, and the
Yeah.
nutrition and food access as well. But we wanted to bring in all kinds of gardening. And when you talked about the sidewalk crack gardening, I love taking pictures and sharing them on Instagram of if plants can grow here,
Yes.
you can have a garden.
Yes.
Like if I see like just in the middle of a road in the asphalt, a tiny tree seedling coming up and it hasn't been run over yet, it's trying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My brother-in-law was telling me that he's got a fence between he and his neighbor, and it's chain link fence with the metal pole. And he said for a while he saw like a little sprout, but he thought it was on the neighbor's side. Then he finally realized that a tree was growing in between the metal post. It had found, and that's, a 6-foot fence. So I think it's the definition too of horticulture and how people are seeing it differently. Like, it doesn't have to be rose, it doesn't have to be perfectly manicured. That the general public is starting to understand what nature truly looks like and how it wants to grow. And so as an industry, we also need to be okay with that it doesn't have to look perfect and be mulched and every time. So I love that. I knew you wrote that book, and I love that.
Yeah, nature does find a way.
Yes, it does.
Always. So for those who didn't listen to the previous episodes, and you should go back and listen to those previous garden trends episodes that we did, can you talk, Katie, a little bit about how you source and find the trends that you
Yes.
share?
Absolutely. So we have been doing this for 22 years. Our 2025 report is our 22nd annual report. Garden Media Group is 36 years old. So my mom started it. You may know Susie McCoy. I know you do, Kathy. So we do a lot of research beforehand. We are already connecting the dots. I told you about traveling to Spain. We do a lot of travel. We interview landscape designers. We look and see what upcoming books are coming out in 2025, 26, down the pipeline, because these are the people who have their fingers on the pulse. We see what new plants are coming. And so some of it is also, to be honest, magic ball reading, crystal ball reading, not magic ball, like, yes, the magic 8-ball, because we've been doing this for so long, we truly understand what's going to stick. And then these are specific garden trends. So it has to really relate to gardening, because there can be some macro trends that are happening out there in the world, but they really have to, our report is focused and specific to the garden industry. So when we throw a lot of spaghetti at the wall, then we have to say, okay, this is happening now. That's not relevant. This will be coming. Here are a couple small examples, but it has to connect to gardening. And we have done some, we have predicted vegetable gardening rising back in 2024, vertical gardening. We talked about AI in 2021's report, which came out in 2020, so almost 5 years ago. So we've really talked about a lot of these things that have come. If you have listened to prior talks, I love to say that we did miss fairy gardening. I didn't see that one coming, and I also hear it's making a comeback too.
Yeah, I would say miniature, railroad, prairie gardens, little mini meadows, all that. Everybody loves tiny. Who doesn't love tiny? It's so much fun. So let's dive into this year's report. So the upcoming 2025 ones. So the first topic I see is no vacancy.
Well, this covers the nature's renaissance. And so our first trend starts on slide 7. And that is the social retreat. So in really what we're looking at here is macro trends. So our trends, the first 3 really are what's happening out there in the world, but obviously that connect to gardening. And then as we go further, there are 8 trends this year. As we go further down through each one, you'll notice that they're much more connected to what is literally which plants we're choosing and what's happening in our backyards. But the first trend we couldn't ignore, Kathy, because, here we are. We know we're listening to podcasts. This is going to be posted on YouTube. You and I are going to promote it on social. But there is a shift, because today we all can agree that not only are we feeling the pressures of addiction to social media and to the, Pavlovian ding of our phone or the red bubbles, we're feeling this stress. But we also are kind of tired of the social landscape right now, whether it be too much content, too many ads, not really sure whether the information is accurate or what sources it's coming from. Toxicity, not in the garden industry, but in other industries for sure. And bots, just not knowing who is real and who is not. We're just kind of tired of it. And so what we're seeing is, in fact, a company called Gartner, which is kind of a Nielsen for social media, predicts that 50% of people are going to dramatically reduce their interactions with major social media platforms. And not just that, but younger people. So people under 30, 60% of them prefer to shift to a smaller niche network. So we're leaving the big networks because we just don't trust them anymore. But that doesn't mean we're not online. Don't be fooled. I wish that I could say, we're returning to IRL, and we'll talk about that a little bit. But that the shift that we see here, the big shift, is these niche communities. So we have a couple examples of them. You might be on your Nextdoor. Are you a member of your Nextdoor community?
For sure.
Yeah. Also, you may have heard of Goodreads. I'm assuming that you have. Your books are probably there and reviewed there. Huge gardening community on Goodreads. You may not have heard of Strava. I don't want to assume you're not a runner, but most people have not, actually, that I have talked to or given this presentation. Have you heard of Strava?
I have not.
It's a running app. I hadn't heard of it either, but one of my colleagues is a big runner, and she said it is a huge meetup for people who want to run. And after this report came out, which was in July, it officially came out to the public in September. And about middle September, I saw an article that said, "Is Strava the new Tinder?" So for those of you that aren't also in the dating community, Tinder is an online dating app. And basically what they were saying is that people are using these smaller niche apps to meet up with folks. And the same thing happened. When I was researching for this, we go on Reddit to see what people are talking about. And there was a Reddit feed about a nature group that had started posting their nature runs on Strava and eventually turned into a club where people were actually meeting up to run it on like really fun trails in communities that had beautiful gardens. And then of course there are some gardening apps that create community, but there are not a ton of them yet. One of them we love is Greg. It's a houseplant app. Another one we love is From Seed to Spoon, which is more of a gardening app, a vegetable gardening app. But what we really think that could be better is more apps creating community in our industry, because these are not just places where people can go to connect with each other, but it creates brand loyalty. So if you're providing community where people are honest and you're providing quality content, and I mean, Justin Hancock, who you and I both know, works at Costa Farms, he's probably on Reddit every day answering people's questions authentically. He is not selling something. He is literally a Reddit superstar because people have valued his content so much. And so that's where we can see the shift going, is away from these big platforms, more towards these niches where people are really looking for quality content and smaller, more interest-based communities to create these like authentic, meaningful connections, which is what gardening is all about, which is, creating lasting relationships. And so that's where we see this shift going on social.
Okay, I was going to say that's great news for garden clubs, plant societies, local botanical gardens, their friends and booster groups. But when you were talking about the Strava running groups looking for great botanic gardens or neighborhoods to run in with lots of great things to see, that was reminding me of Waze and the problems people have with drivers cutting through their neighborhoods now and finding these back ways that they never did before. That all of a sudden you're going to see a bunch of runners and you're like, why are there so many runners in my neighborhood all of a sudden, or dog walkers or whatever it may be. This will be a funny trend to watch and see people are reporting all these running groups all of a sudden coming to them.
Well, I think that's a great point though about garden clubs and, societies, is that if you are looking to grow your membership, these people are not just looking to create community, but they are looking for in real life IRL meetups. And you've seen some garden centers tell people to meet up at their garden center if they're going for a run, or have a book club hosted at the garden center. So I think this is a great opportunity to remember that we do want those in real life interactions, and particularly young people, they are craving it and they're looking for it. So it's a great way to go on these different apps and try to create that meetup.
I agree. I think in real life or in person, as we say, meetups are so important. And I have had so many online groups that are like, hey, let's get together, and getting to meet people and match the faces better to who they are has been really rewarding.
Yeah. Yes.
So let's dive into trend number 2, grow your own way.
This is a perfect transition because this really takes this niche trend into in real life meetups. And this one was actually spurred on by a trend that we saw happening in Europe, which was these listening bars. So we started seeing more and more and more of these listening bars come up. And then Live Nation came out with their revenue data. Now we've updated it since the report came out, and they continue to grow. So this really is about funflation or revenge spending, that fans are eager to return to live music experiences. Music is showing up post-pandemic as one of the most important things in people's lives. And I mean, I know I see it amongst my friends. Taylor Swift, a huge phenomenon. People are not just willing to go to concerts, but they're willing to spend a lot of money on these concerts. So we see this as a huge trend, not just concerts in public gardens, but Spotify has actually really leaned into this with their users, and they've done a bunch of surveys to see how are people using plants while they garden, or do the people who listen to Spotify also garden? And a staggering number of them do. And we have to remember the Spotify audience is probably skewing a little younger. So that's great news for us as we look forward to the industry, the future of our health of our industry. But Spotify said that when they surveyed their listeners, 81% of gardeners listen to music while tending to their plants, and pop was the biggest genre. So, I mean, again, we have to remember who the audience probably is. But, the fun thing is that we also know research proves that plants also enjoy listening to music. So there is some research out there about what specific frequencies that they enjoy. But what this really is about is how this musical renaissance is leading into social experiences. So how people are using it to meet up. And I told you about the listening bars. And so this trend really caters to the new sober curious folks. And so it's not anywhere more just sober October and dry January. We are seeing people really experiment with less drinking. And so that's part of the reason for the rise of the listening bar. And then in addition to that, we're also seeing the maybe dissatisfaction with that the club restaurant, where it was so loud. You've probably been there. You can't barely see your menu because it's so dark. And so people really want music in their lives. And so the psychology of music plays such an important role in our lives that we think it's really important to bring it into the gardens too, not just in our actual gardens, but in our garden centers. How are we using music to take people through the store on a journey? And we also have our own Spotify playlist, which can be found on our social media, on our Instagram channel, or if you are following us along in video, there's a QR code here too. So we created a Spotify playlist for our trends. Why not? Let's have some music that accompanies the things we do. When you put out a book, why not have a music playlist that accompanies it? So let's figure out how to tie music more into our daily lives, because it is something that we think for sure is going to further make people enjoy the enhancement of nature and how they connect with nature.
So I do have to say that Spotify is the GardenDC podcast platform. So some of the listeners could also be viewing this video via Spotify, and I hope you are. We'll give you a little wave out there. And great news about the gardening side of Spotify, and hopefully they're not just listening to music while they're tending their plants, that they're also listening to garden podcasts or other podcasts. And that's one of my favorite things to do is when I'm out weeding is catching up on my podcasts.
Me too.
and that's a great way to do it. So I'm going to move off the curated list and ask you what a BYOV night is.
Oh, I got so many texts when we launched this about loving the bring your own vinyl night. So this is a tip for anyone who might have a retail store. But if you don't, maybe, and you're just a gardener who has a store they love, go to your local garden center and say, do you want to host a bring your own vinyl night? This brings in that younger audience who loves the nostalgia of records. So people are doing all these wild things. I don't even know. They're buying like real cameras, disposable cameras, getting them filmed done at CVS, or it's just this nostalgia. And so bring your own vinyl really encourages people to come into the garden center and have an interactive musical experience. You can have a DJ, you can align it with plants. So for example, one of our trends last year was goth gardening. You could have a goth gardening night if you really want, and you could have really dark styling plants. You just have to make sure your audience knows what they're getting into, because I might not want to attend that, but someone else might be really into it.
Yeah, definitely. So let's move into the next trend of this place doesn't exist.
Yep, this one's going to stretch your imagination. And in fact, we are leaning even more into this in 2026 because we're seeing so much AI. This is about artificial intelligence. This is about every Zoom or Teams call that you're on, that someone has this faux background. We are ingrained in AI, whether you know it or not. And it's becoming more and more part of our daily experiences. And in fact, people are actually gravitating towards these things. And as much as we don't love to see it as an industry, the imagery, the falseness of it, not just our industry, it's happening across the board. We have to understand that people are into this. They're excited about it. And one of the reasons is because these are spaces that we've created in our own imaginations, spaces that are supernaturally cozy, that make us feel safe. They're like living in one of our own dreams. And we have to acknowledge that sometimes the real world fails to deliver that safety. And so these are AI generated visions of our own perfect world. So people are not just drawn to AI images of, dark basements, right? What are they creating when they're dreaming up the perfect spaces? They're creating gardens. They're creating natural spaces that might look a little, off to us, but this is what their vision of perfection looks like. And so as we navigate this new AI landscape, particularly for our industry, I really challenge people not to make judgments, not to look at others when they're posting some of these imagery and say, you don't know that that's a fake plant. You have no idea what you're doing. I've seen a lot of this on the internet coming out of people I know who garden, who post these, a faux begonia and say, how could someone possibly think this is real? Well, I think that what we should do instead is view these images through which our new hobbyists are, and that they are cute, that they are fun, and that they are whimsical and what we call tyrannically cute. And it's a way for them to express themselves. And if it gets them into real gardening, then yay, right? That is what we want. So, and we're seeing this on Pinterest like nowhere else. If you just type in, cute plants or plants with never before seen colors, you will see a whole host of, some plants that look like they have flowers that look like butterflies, or dahlias that look like they have little cat faces. They're ridiculous. But in our world, we actually have plants that are super cute, that the flowers do kind of look like butterflies, begonias, or we have dahlias where the imagery is really cute of the actual petals. So what we think our challenge as an industry to do is to encourage people to dream. Listen, put it all out there and then show them the reality that they can actually have a tyrannically cute garden in soft pastels if they want. So there are a couple of other ideas in our report. If you are a retailer, I'm not sure we need to go into all of these, but one of the most interesting ones I think that blows my mind is these AI generated relaxation videos. Have you seen any of these? Maybe if you're getting your nails done.
Oh yeah, they're kind of I call them not a dreamscape, but wallpaper-ish too.
Exactly. Yeah. It's playing on the TV. It's got this really peaceful music. Gen Z is using them to sleep. They're using them to study. They play them constantly. And there's one for every possible genre out there. But our industry is the biggest. The natural nature scenes are the biggest. So one of the things that we think garden centers could do, or botanical gardens, anywhere that there's a peaceful, relaxing place, is record it for 2 hours or more, 11. Some of these videos are 11 hours long, and then post it on YouTube with the title AI relaxation video, and then whatever your botanical garden or your name is, and just see how the views go. Make sure it's set to music, or there's a natural water feature that's running. And we think that these are going to far surpass the AI videos. People want nature, they want real, but they're just sometimes not sure like where to find it.
Yeah. It almost sounds like I always say it wrong, ASMR, AMSR.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah.
So the extension of that really is
Yes.
having visuals. And yeah, I've been watching yoga and meditation videos for years, and that's very similar. Usually it'll be like a Hawaiian waterfall or something like that, and that you're watching in the background while maybe somebody is talking, or they're not
Yeah.
talking. It's just your
Yeah.
meditation time while that's happening.
Yep.
And then getting back to some of the AI going around the internet that people are up in arms about, of course, you got like the hosta blends that I've been seeing, like it's in a still be flowers coming out of a hosta, and the hosta might be painted blue.
Yep.
And I heard a couple of plant breeders at the Daylily conference I attended a few weeks ago talking about using AI as future breeding inspiration. So I
Wow.
thought that was an interesting take on it. And he used AI to show, here's what I am looking for in the leaves and eventually in my flowers, and the
Super
frills
cool.
on the edge. They're going to be totally curled over. Right now, they're just kind of C curls. But what happens when they're total circles? This is what it's going to look like. And also getting that true blue daylily, of course, that they're always looking for. And so this could be used as a tool in that way.
I love that. I love that positivity, that sourcing from what people are posting to make changes. I mean, that's just such like a win-win for both people. We are seeing what's possible to create through AI, and then breeders are actually creating it. That is so cool.
GardenDC will be back after this short break.
Get low-maintenance alternatives to lawns with Ground Cover Revolution by Kathy Jentz. Reducing the lawn is among the biggest trends in homeownership, with an endless stream of homeowners looking for an eco-friendly alternative to a traditional turfgrass lawn. In the last few years alone, over 23 million Americans converted part of their lawn to a natural landscape, and now they're looking to do even more. The biggest challenge to adopting this new ideal of the perfect lawn? Knowing how and when to replace your turf and which plants are the best ones for the job. Ground Cover Revolution is here with all the answers you need, and some you didn't even know you needed. Included are 40 in-depth profiles of plants that are perfect choices for replacing a grass lawn. There are options for sun, for shade, for dry and wet sites, and for various climates around the globe. There are choices that bloom, options that are evergreen, and selections that are deer-resistant. Kathy Jentz has also included an incredibly useful chart that gives you all the specifics on each of the 40 choices for quick reference and to make your ground cover selection process even easier. Whether you want to replace the entire lawn or just reduce the amount of land dedicated to turf, Ground Cover Revolution will help you usher in a new and improved idea of what a beautiful lawn should be. Ground Cover Revolution is available now wherever you buy books, including Amazon.com and Bookshop.org.
So let's jump into our next trend.
All right, trend number 4. This is when we just get way more specific in the garden. So this trend is called lived in gardens, and it celebrates authenticity and character. You're probably all going to roll your eyes when I talk to you about why this one came about. I saw an article in the Wall Street Journal about vintage Rolexes outselling new ones. And I was surprised. So I read through the article, and it talked a lot about the character and that people really want the look that my grandfather passed this down to me. And they want that sentimentality, but they don't have it. And so they can actually buy it and fake it. The same thing with the Golden Goose sneaker. Have you heard of the Golden Goose sneaker?
know, but
Well, I'm sorry to tell you that there is an actual sneaker that looks like your oldest garden shoe you've ever had, and it retails for over $600.
And I just threw out an old pair of sneakers, Katie. Old gardening sneakers.
Could have sold them on eBay.
Yeah.
So, when we started to like layer on, why is society looking for items that are cherished for a lived in look? And it really is that idea of things that feel personal, they feel sentimental, they feel loved. And so we said, okay, well, how does this correlate to the garden? And does this correlate to the garden? That's kind of the next steps of our thought process. And we saw new research, actually. We both know the benefits of gardening and how it impacts your real estate value. But that research was kind of old, but brand new research came out that said that a well-manicured landscape can increase your property values almost 13%. So, in an era where, it really is a seller's market now, but it's even more if you have a well-manicured landscape, that will make your house look even better. And so we're thinking, okay, so then if it is a junky landscape, no. If it's brand new, no. It has to be a mature landscape. And buyers prioritize sophisticated design. Research shows a preference for mature trees and plants, which alone, we know mature trees and plants can significantly increase property value on their own from, 1,000 to 10,000, which is what the research shows. So what we really think is by embracing this lived-in trend, you're not only creating, this beautiful garden, but you're investing in a landscape that grows more valuable over time. So achieving this look is something that is instant gratification. We're trying to help as a designer, as a garden center, as a grower, as a consumer. How do I get an instant look? And if you look at some of my friends who are designers, I already mentioned Kelly Norris, who redid his front yard garden in 3 years from grass to beautiful meadow. Nick McCullough is another landscape designer that I love who moved into a vacant lot and within 3 years had, sometimes things cost money, but 8-foot hedges, mature trees, matured looking plantings. So these things can be done if you follow just a couple steps. So number one, we know planting densely. Like you cannot just plant 6 tulips. You have to go all out and you have to plant really densely. And that's been a message of our industry for a long time. I think people don't really know how to plant if they're, an average homeowner, they really don't know the spacing. It's hard when you see the tag and it says plant 3 feet apart, but the plant is, 5 inches wide. That's a really difficult thing to do. Another difficult thing to do is embrace imperfections. And this goes back to our nature's renaissance. When we are looking at, trees that maybe have lost a limb or even just the trunk of a tree. Again, the Philly Flower Show had just tree trunks in the center of a beautiful exhibit. So it's this idea of spaces that have changed over time. And then, native plants, of course, we're big into native plants, but you want to grow plants that look a little bit more wild, like they have grown there over time. We love our bulb lawns. So these idea of Stinson gardens, which are ancient 1500s Dutch practice, planting crocus and other ephemerals in your actual grass. It just makes things look like they've been there over time. And so these are ecological benefits, but they're also benefits for you long-term for your, for beauty and for value.
Yeah, and I can see that some people might consider a little more informal, a little bit more messy garden, but this is, my style of gardening for sure. You'll say cottage, you'll say shabby chic, might be another way of saying it, but worn in, lived in, well loved is another great way to phrase it. And, moss lawns, the ground cover revolution book I wrote goes right along with that because you're filling in that bottom layer and planting with abundance. So you're not having a little shrub, as you say, then a bunch of mulch, and then another little shrub, and then a bunch of mulch. You want to see it stuffed full of plants.
Yes. Yes. I feel like every year we can reference your ground cover revolution book. It's like another reason why ground covers are so important. Maybe they're not a trend anymore. Maybe they are a move, like, it is a
Yeah,
movement that
a
is here to
revolution has
stay.
happened.
Yes, it has. But still get the book.
Yes. So let's jump into living fences. That's trend number 5 in your
Yep.
report.
This is inspired kind of by some grand British estate gardens, but also by wild gardens by Pete Odolph. It's not just the idea of a living hedge is not just a boxwood or yew hedge. I think in this case, we need to help not just our industry, but consumers see all of the variety of options they have, particularly when we think about that 84% of people who are now living in an HOA. They're allowed to paint their house color one of 3 colors, and their fence has to be a certain height and a certain color. And so these living fences add so much life to landscapes that might be a little bit more sterile. And not just that, but we're seeing that people are willing to invest money. $5,000 they spent this summer on outdoor areas. So that's really exciting for us. That's a lot of money, and more than the National Gardening Association reports people spend, in 5 years. So we're really excited about that. But one of the things that we really want to encourage people to do is think beyond the traditional monotonous hedge and think about maybe a mix. So we know, you and I both know that maybe there's some challenges with planting just one species if it gets wiped out by disease or pests. So plant a variety, and then now your fence provides you with privacy, but it also can provide habitat. It can provide a wild look. It can provide shelter for wildlife, food, and it looks beautiful and has color and varied texture. So there's a lot of different reasons why we think having this kind of living border can turn your backyard into a vibrant ecosystem. We love National Wildlife Federation for their native plant finder. In partnership with Doug Tallamy, they created this great list of plants. So if you are looking for a wildlife friendly hedge, go to that to see what works best in your region. But there's also great other reasons why you would, put up this privacy fence. If you're looking for a lived in look, it will look estate worthy. It will look just absolutely stunning in a very short period of time. We list some varieties here. We love Little Missy Dragon Prince Buxus, the Cryptomeria. We also love Better Boxwood, which is a new boxwood variety. Do you know about Better Boxwood, Kathy? Yeah. Good. Then we're doing our job right. But if you're also looking for more of a natural look, we've got Party Lights Osmanthus or Acacia Cousin It. Have you seen those acacias that
Weeping acacias?
Yes.
Really, yeah.
Yep. So very different types of plants that you can grow as a living fence. And that's one of the things we really want people to understand is that this is going to help us embrace these private spaces, which we know more people added patios, pools over the pandemic than ever before. But now we want to make them a little more private. We don't want our neighbor coming over with their towel every day. If we're out there doing work or whatever we're doing, we are creating these spaces that are private, but part of a living, breathing ecosystem, because sustainability is one of the most important things for all people, but particularly younger consumers.
I'm thinking of Eva Monheim's Shrubs and Hedges book.
Yes.
That came out a few years ago, and she was a past guest on this podcast. You can check out that episode, and she has her own podcast, Plant a Trillion Trees podcast, but that's a great resource. As I was going to say, also the benefit of a layered hedge where it's different plants layered in is you get those different textures and colors, of course, but also it's not a monoculture.
Yeah.
So the worst thing is when you plant a row of something and then that third one in dies. It's inevitable that one of them is going to die, and it's never at the end of the row. It's always somewhere in the middle part. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. It's so important. I mean, I think we learned with elms and name all the tree species, ashes, that we can't plant monocultures anymore.
Mm-hmm. So let's jump into trend 6, foraged.
Yes. Foraged, and you met the Oasis Forage folks at Mance, I think. But this next trend, talking about connecting with nature, nature's renaissance, and sustainability, our next trend, really the art of flower foraging. This is not food foraging, which, here in Kennett Square, the mushroom capital of the world, is a big deal for us. But this is really about collecting flowers from nature and not having a specific bouquet in mind, just allowing that Zen moment to take over. And one of the things that we think really spurred this on was amateur flower farmers. I mean, they're everywhere on my social media feeds, but also in real life. I walk down my little town here in Pennsylvania and I see every other store, whether it's a small grocery store or a clothing boutique, they're selling local bouquets of flowers. So I think that as gardeners, as general people who aren't gardeners, we are slowly beginning to understand the seasonality of flowers. No, you cannot have peonies in September. That is not going to be what you see in your local bouquet. And conversely, you can't have dahlias in June. So, I think we're starting to slowly understand about that seasonality. And people are starting to slowly understand they can do this at home too. And one of the champions of this, his name is Ace Berry, and he's kind of a famous floral designer, if one such does exist. He was on HBO's In Full Bloom TV show. And he really made it more obvious to me that the idea of flower foraging is a Zen moment, because you're not like looking for a specific bouquet of something when you go out into your yard. You are actually looking at your yard. And this is not a cut flower garden either. This is actually cutting from your shrubs and your trees and maybe your vegetable garden and some flowers and getting what's in bloom so you can be one in the moment. So when we talk about this trend of flower foraging, number one, we have to make sure we just cover a couple ethical notes. And there's a great book by Whitney Johnson, Go Forth and Forage, about this. But of course, have a plan, but be aware of local wildlife and local plants. You don't want to pick anything that's poisonous or invasive or endangered. And then, of course, you also, my biggest second tip is only take what you need and don't rip them out by the roots, right? We are trimming and cutting just like you would in your own garden. You are wanting to prune. You're wanting to prune. And the cool thing about this, actually, Homestead has had some foraging classes where people cut from the shrubs, the star roses that they have right there. And it's teaching people how to prune. People are afraid to cut their flowers and their plants and their shrubs. Just walk through any garden. Mine right now needs to be pruned, but it's something that I think people really don't know how to do. And so not only is this helping them enjoy gardening 365 days a year, 24 hours a day, because they look outside and they can see it, but they're also bringing it indoors. But it's also helping people understand how to care for their gardens a little bit better.
Yeah, so true. And I think I've always called deadheading my cutting garden. Like it's the same thing.
Exactly.
Like go ahead and cut before the flower's fully dead. Enjoy it indoors,
Yes.
and that's your deadheading. And then you don't have to go back and deadhead later. Same thing with pruning. You're doing just a little bit premature pruning or selective pruning, we can call it, but it is giving permission. You're right that a lot of people are afraid, or they think that's the outside flowers, and then they have their inside plants, but they don't cross the barriers too much.
Right. None the two shall meet. No, but they will. And I think that we're seeing some trends in designing flowers, and that, if you want to follow that or not, that's fine. One of the things that we think garden centers could do is sell collections of shrubs that will make great cut flowers. So, Sunshine Ligustrum is a great one. And then the Oasis Forage people actually have containers and snips and foam and materials to help people be successful. Because another problem is, I've done this before. I've gone and cut stuff from my garden, put it in a vase, and it just doesn't look the same way it looks on Pinterest. And so the Oasis Forage people are using Ace and his design expertise to help people just kind of close that loop and design beautiful creations that you can be proud of.
Mm-hmm. Can't wait to see some of those arrangements
Yeah.
people make. All right, so we're coming up on trend number 7.
And second to last trend, and it's our houseplant trend. We present this to the tropical plant industry folks, and we really want, I think every year people want to know what's happening indoors as well as out. And so this year, actually, our trend mimics fashion. And I love when this happens because it doesn't always happen. We're not always the trendiest industry. But here we're seeing the return of dresses that have kind of cutouts to them. And so when we started to see that return on the red carpet, we thought, okay. And then we see Monsteras. Monsteras, right, they've been rising in popularity ever since the pandemic, even before the pandemic, but they're continuing to grow. And they both have the same thing, are these cutouts and these holes. And it's not just the fenestrations, but it's the idea of a plant that has less green than open air. And why is that popular? And I think it's the same reason why we're drawn to it in our fashion is because it has a little bit of allure. You wonder, okay, it's not just a black dress, it's what's behind that dress. Not to get a little risque, but we are really seeing this playful silhouette, and the plants that are most popular, or we think will be most popular, mimic that playful silhouette, and they create depth. So instead of having a corner in your house where your monstera the leaf is so big, or your philodendron leaf is so big you can't see anything behind it, now there are new varieties like the Monstera esqueleto, which I have and I love so much. You can see it. I just recently posted a picture on our Garden Media Group Instagram, but you now can layer that plant. So you have your esqueleto, which is still the big, interesting Monstera leaf, and now you can see the other varieties of plants you have behind it. So besides the fenestrations, which are those holes in the plants, there are also plants that are super fringy. Someone just told me that there's a bone something cactus that is really popular. And then the philodendron tortum, which is a brand new plant, which kind of looks like rib bones. Just the idea of this airy kind of see-through plants, which really are dominating the interior spaces we see, coming up in the next year.
Yeah, I think ferns, obviously, a great choice. And I think some of the succulents that you might be talking about, like they look like just sticks. They have hardly anything else to them, but they're just like a little pencil, like pencil cactus type things. All right, so we're coming up on trend number 8.
Yes, the last trend, and we always save the color of the year for last because it's just a fun one. We don't take ourselves too seriously, and this year's color is teal, and it is just a bold, big, bright color, and we're looking for positivity in 2025. We're looking to connect with nature, so the crystal clear Caribbean or the vast open skies. So that's one of the reasons why we chose this. But to be honest, the bigger reason that we chose this is because of this powerful nostalgia. So there is something happening right now, which just get ready for it, I'm going to make you all feel old, that Gen Z is having nostalgia for technology of the early 2000s. Woo! It was just yesterday. How could we possibly have nostalgia for the 2000s? I feel like that was just a couple years ago. But if you remember those old Mac computers that had the colorful, backs to them, or the first iPhone, which was really round and bubbly and the colors were bright. We were not in this era that we are in now, which is metallic and sleek and small and skinny. They are having nostalgia for a bold, optimistic energy in technology. And it's called the Frutiger Arrow aesthetic. And it was a designer of the time. And when you put in Frutiger Arrow in TikTok, you'll see thousands and thousands and thousands of posts about it. And the main color of that era was teal. And so we really think that this nostalgia is an important moment in time for 2025 for the garden. And for social media. So if you're posting on social media, and if you remember last year, we picked Cyber Lime, and then the Brat era happened this summer. So when you really are thinking of this as a moment in time, we think teal is going to have its moment for 2025. And the reason why we also love it, it has to be relevant to the garden. It cannot just be something that is a color out there in the universe that we think is relevant. But we think that the idea of patina really echoes back to that lived in look, whether it's purposeful patina, something that you've bought to look that way or you've made look that way, or copper that has patinaed over time to give that lived in look. Or, your hardscaping. I just talked to another journalist about 5 curb appeal trends. And one that they said they were seeing was big, bold colors. And I said, like teal? And so we're seeing this in front doors, in shutters, trim. If you don't want to go that far, hardware accents. So a lot of different ways you can use teal. But you might be thinking, well, how the heck can I use it in plants? Well, there's a lot of really fun plants. Now, they're not exactly teal. You have to stretch your mind a little bit, but beyond blue fescue, that is a beautiful teal hue that, our fescues can provide. Agaves, you and I were talking about succulents, all different kinds of succulents in that teal family.
Yeah, that's a great one. Yep.
Senecios. I love senecios. Some of these plants are not perennial for where you and I live, but some people might have them as perennial. So just thinking about this really cool blue, how it looks in the garden. And we also love how it kind of handshakes with cyber lime. This blue and the cyber lime go nicely together. So if you did add any of those Sunshine ligustrums or pothos inside, Queenie limes, whatever you're doing, this really goes nicely with that cyber lime color. So
it has a lot of silver undertones to it. So all those silvery gray plants kind of play into it with like a blue echo.
Yep.
And we're just writing in Washington Gardener magazine about the Kaluna flower truck, a local florist who goes around, and she has a vintage truck that's beautiful teal, and is great moment there, which I think a lot of metal accents are being painted in teal tones now.
Yep.
So I love to see those.
Cool. So that's it. That's the report. And when you do download it, we have a list of all of our sources. So in case you have any questions about where we got some of the information or the statistics, those are linked in there. We don't make them up.
And how can our listeners find out more or contact you, Katie?
Well, you can download this report at gardenmediagroup.com/trends. And we have a handy trends email address. It's just trends@gardenmediagroup.com. If you have any questions, we're also on social media at Garden Media Group across all the platforms. So happy to take any questions or tips for 2026. We want to know what's coming, what you're seeing.
I'm laughing because I just got joined by Santino. He's like, oh, I need to talk about this garden.
Yeah, you haven't pet me for an hour, please.
So Santino says hello. Well, thank you so much, Katie. It's always so much fun to hear about those upcoming garden trends. And we did promise a little glimpse of 2026. So you can give us a little bite of what might be coming.
Well, we're thinking
further.
Yep, we're thinking more in technology. I'm reading a lot about gaming in the garden. So I don't know if you're a gamer, Kathy, but a particular way to attract a younger audience about garden games. And then you just talked about pastels, hues like eucalyptus and these other dusty colors. We're seeing a big trend of colors that are muted. So kind of like a eucalyptus or something that looks like there's a dusting over top of it, almost a filter, if you will, over top of that color. So we're looking into that. It's coming out of Japan. We're seeing this. I don't know the Japanese word for it, but it's this idea of a plant's life cycle. And think about when they're at their end of their life, how they kind of have that dusty look. So those are some of the things that we're toying with right now. Who knows whether they'll make it in or not, but we're always, once we put 25 to bed or one trends report to bed, we start thinking about the next year.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm going to have to look out for some of those dusty or filtered. Interesting plants. Yeah, I'm starting to picture some of those besides the downy mildew on my peonies.
Right now. Yeah, not that.
Not that, but on purpose. Yeah. So that's wonderful. Thank you, Katie. And we're definitely going to have you back next December to talk about
Can't wait.
It is like the time just keeps going, and I'll see you soon at Mance and the Philadelphia Flower Show.
Can't wait. Thank you so much.
Thank you again.
GardenDC will be back after this short break.
In the book The Urban Garden by Kathy Jentz and Terry Spate, you'll find dozens of inspiring and creative ways to grow flowers, shrubs, vegetables, herbs, and other plants in small spaces and with a limited budget. Whether you want to grow on a balcony, rooftop, front stoop, or a tiny urban patio, turn your growing dreams into reality and build a gorgeous and unique garden that showcases your personal style while still being functional and productive. With the ingenious ideas and resourceful tactics found here, you'll be maximizing yields and beauty from every square inch of your space. No matter what you grow, the 101 amazing growing ideas found in the urban garden will turn your tiny urban yard into a treasure trove of green you'll be proud to share with family and friends. Buy your copy today at your local retail bookseller or order it online now at Amazon.com or bookshop.org.
Silver and Gold Chrysanthemum Plant Profile. Silver and Gold Chrysanthemum, Agenia pacifica, previously known as Chrysanthemum pacificum, is a perennial plant with silvery edges to its leaves and clusters of yellow-gold flowers. It blooms in late fall, when most other plants are going dormant. It's native to the island of Honshu, Japan, as well as to Central and Eastern Asia. In its native habitat, it grows along coastlines. It is salt-tolerant and is hardy to USDA zones 5 to 9. Silver and gold chrysanthemum grows best in full sun and in a spot with great drainage. It will rot if planted in soggy soils. It is a good container plant and also ideal for rock gardens. It can spread by rhizomes to form a 2 to 3 feet wide mat and act as a ground cover. To propagate it, dig and divide it in the spring, or you can take stem cuttings. The long-lasting flowers are visited by bees and butterflies. It is deer-resistant. Silver and gold chrysanthemum. You can grow that. What's new this week in the garden? Well, we've been having some freezing temps and high winds, so I've been hibernating mostly inside, and that means I am forcing some paperwhites into bloom, which brings up our garden tip of the day. For the last few days, I've been advising about paperwhites and how you can grow them successfully. And if you try out that tip you've probably heard in past years about adding vodka or alcohol to the water you have your paperwhites sitting in, you should know that it's really a low percentage, just about 5%, 5 to 6% of that water should be the alcohol. And you should not start adding the alcohol until the paperwhites have sent out their roots into the growing medium. So whether you have them in pebbles or in soil or anchored some other way, wait till there's some root formation and then do the alcohol tip, and that will stunt their growth just a little bit to keep them on the short side so they're not flopping over on you. So I'm super excited to share that we are soft launching a new garden store, and the link for that is shop.kathygents.com. We've created this online shop for you to send garden gifts to loved ones from the comfort of your couch and off your cell phone if you want to do it that way. We're partnering with some of the best growers and best tool and supply brands in the garden space to ship from their fields and workshops straight to you. And I'm happy to say we just added on Cobra Head, which in the last episode I talked about how much I love their tools. So you can visit shop.kathygents.com to browse and look at those items. We're adding new items every week, and I've just ordered some amaryllis to send to some of my gift recipients on my gift list, and maybe you can take a browse and see if you want to do the same and sprinkle some amaryllis or other bulbs amongst your holiday gift list. So some local garden events in the greater Washington, D.C. area coming up includes at the Silburn Mansion in Baltimore, Maryland. They're dressing to impress this holiday season. Their holiday hours are Saturdays and Sundays, 10 to 4, Wednesdays, 1 to 4. And the special holiday events there include the Mansion Open House with guided tours and live music on certain dates. So check that out at the Silburn Arboretum website. And Silburn is Cylburn. And then a new program was added at the U.S. Botanic Garden that I think many of you will want to watch, and that is Heirloom Collards and Conversation. That's on Friday, December 13th at noon. You can register for free at the usbg.gov/programs to get the live link for that. And that is two prior guests from the GardenDC podcast who we love, and they are speaking about gardening and seed stories, and that's Ira Wallace, seed saver educator with Southern Exposure Seed Exchange, and Bonetta Adib, farmer educator community organizer with Ujama Cooperative Farming Alliance. So they're partnering together for this wonderful program, which I encourage you to sign up for. And then looking a little bit ahead, the Mid-Atlantic Nursery Trade Show, also known as MANTS, is taking place in downtown Baltimore at the Convention Center on January 8th through 10th. This is the largest private trade show serving the horticultural industry on the East Coast. And you can do early bird registration now at mants.com. And that, of course, is open to the business trade, professional horticulturalist. So when you fill out your registration, you will need to mark off what kind of business you are to attend that. But I hope I do see you there. This is our last new episode of 2024. Thank you all for listening. And I'm looking forward to a wonderful 2025 with you, and hope to see you back in the new year. During our holiday break, I hope you take advantage of some of our back catalog, and I will put up some suggestions on our blog and website for some past episodes that I think you might want to listen to if you didn't hear them already, or re-listen to if you've already heard them. Happy gardening!
This is Christy Page with Food Gardening Network and the 5 Reasons to Try Soil Solarization This Year by Amanda MacArthur. Ta-da! That's what my daughter says when she presents a magic trick. Pull a coin from behind my ear and you'll soon hear ta-da! A rabbit pulled from a hat is accompanied by expansive gestures and, of course, a hearty ta-da! So what's that got to do with solarization? Well, it's kind of like magic and deserves its own little ta-da. Do you have out-of-control weeds every year? Soil solarization and ta-da! No more weeds. Did you get hit with a severe soil burn plant disease? Guess what can take care of that for you? There's some potential disadvantages that I'll touch on, but first, what is soil solarization? It's actually an environmentally friendly method of controlling insects, weeds, and bacteria. The process involves covering the ground with a tarp to trap solar energy. The sun heats the soil to temperatures that kill bacteria, fungi, insects, nematodes, mites, weeds, and weed seeds. The trick is that the soil needs to either hold moisture, such as clay soil, or you need to water it first. It's a combination of steam and heat that makes soil solarization so effective. The process is simple enough. Clean and level your soil, soak the ground with water, tightly cover the area with a transparent plastic sheet or tarp, and then wait. It can take 4 to 6 weeks for the process to work. So what are the benefits? What are the drawbacks? Here are some reasons you may or may not want to try soil solarization. Number 1, aside from purchasing the plastic, it's a free method of pest, pathogen, and weed control. 2, the process is solar powered, so there are no chemicals or runoff to worry about. 3, it improves soil quality as the heat helps break down organic material into nutrients. 4, it helps control pathogens, including those that cause verticillium mold, tomato canker, potato scab, and many others. And number 5, it seems to have long-term success in controlling weeds. So those are all excellent reasons to try, but what are some of the drawbacks? Number one, because solarization relies on heat, it's more effective when the overall air temperature is higher. While you may be able to find success with winter solarization in warmer areas, those in cooler climates likely won't be able to take advantage of solarization until spring or even early summer. 2. Since you need high temperatures and the process takes up to 6 weeks to be most effective, it could put a damper on your spring gardening plans. 3. While it can kill and control many pathogens and harmful pests, the heat generation can also kill beneficial insects and organisms. Is it magic? Well, it very well may be, especially if you have recurring issues with plant pathogens or you're completely overwhelmed with weeds. Should you try it? Well, as long as you're aware of the drawbacks, it could make your future gardening endeavors much more successful. This has been The Last Word by Christy Page at foodgardening.com.
Thank you for listening to GardenDC. You can become a listener supporter for as little as 99 cents a month by going to the supporter link in our show notes or directly to podcasters.spotify.com/pod/show/GardenDC/support. Another way to support this podcast is to subscribe to our monthly digital publication, Washington Gardener Magazine. To do so, go to WashingtonGardener.com or WashingtonGardener.blogspot.com. You can find Washington Gardener on social media at WDC Gardener on Twitter or X, Instagram, and Pinterest, and on Facebook at Washington Gardener Magazine. And be sure to leave us a 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform. Please take a minute to share us on social media with #GardenDC so other gardeners can find us too.